More? Yeah. I don't want to be in front of the camera. So first, let me just say an introduction. When we talk about prophecy in Judaism, prophecy has to be something which, number one, is predicted many thousands of years ago, and it has to be a prediction which, according to the laws of nature or any sort of factual event, is something that you cannot anticipate or see. For example, when the weatherman tells you what the weather's going to be tomorrow, or on Sunday or on Monday, is that prophecy? I mean, despite the fact he's usually wrong, but what he's doing is he has models and all sorts of the measuring wind patterns. Okay, maybe it wasn't. Okay, thank you. We know this nation had a war with Jacob. Esau is fighting Jacob, the two brothers. We know that the battle emerged as they got older. There was a contention over the blessings. We know later that Jacob has to disguise himself as Esau in order to get further blessings. We know that Jacob is on the run from Esau. He returns to the land. Esau wants to kill him. This is a battle that goes on throughout the life of Jacob. Our rabbis teach us that whatever is going to happen to Jacob, that fight between Jacob and Esau, is going to be imitated by the children. Meaning, just as Jacob and Esau are contesting and they're battling, the children of Jacob, which is going to be Israel, and the children of Esau, which are going to be Amalek, are also going to have a historical battle. Now, it's very interesting if you think about it. Jacob and Esau, where did they fight?
Stomach.
First, it begins in the womb. There's some sort of spiritual battle going on. But the first real fight emerges when they're going to receive a blessing. And this blessing has to do with the right of control of Eretz Yisrael. Who is going to the land of Israel? Who's going to have the spiritual force of Eretz Yisrael? Because we believe about Eretz Yisrael, about the land of Israel, it's not just a holy land. It's not just a homeland, it's a holy land. The word Eretz Yisrael means Ani Ratz Yashar El. I can run, Ani Aleph Ratz, run, Yashar El, straight to God. That's what It shows that we do. Interesting. As soon as we receive the Torah, where are we going? We're going right to the land of Israel. That's where we're supposed to go. 40 years was after we disappeared. The spies went in and spoke with Nara, things like that. But after we received the Torah, the goal was to go right into the land of Israel. All of a sudden, Esau's grandchildren, Amalek, are there and they attack us. And it wasn't just a spontaneous attack. You know where they came from? They were a tribe, actually, that was in the lower tip of Saudi Arabia. They crossed 500 kilometers to attack us. We're coming out of Egypt. They're coming from Saudi Arabia to stop us from coming to the land. And it was a tremendous battle. And we did succeed, but it was a battle. Now, it's interesting, by the way, in this battle that we have with Amalek as they're coming into, as we're about to go into the land of Israel, it says that Amalek attacked us. And then listen to this. I just want to point this out to you. The Torah says that they did a very interesting thing. With the Jews that they killed, it said they took the area of the Brit Milah, and they threw it up to the sky and said, God, here's your Brit Milah. Look what we did to it. They mutilated the Brit Milah. Just hold that thought for a moment. Why they did such a thing. They mutilated the Brit Milah. They couldn't stand the Brit Milah. Now, we meet this nation again, when? Approximately 800 years later. Our temple is destroyed. We go into exile. First we go into Babylonia, then we go into Persia. At the end of the Persian exile, what happens is, we know it's the story of Purim. And what happened is, 70 years after we were exiled, we had a prophecy. We were supposed to go back into the land of Israel. As soon as we were about to go back, all of a sudden, a person emerges on the human scene named Amalek. What's his real name though? Haman. Haman comes to power. Haman was a nobody. He was a barber in Persia. He only had one redeeming character. He hated Jews. And he united the entire Persian Empire under Ahasuerus to make a decree that every Jew, man, woman, and child should be killed on the same day. He didn't succeed, of course, then we have the holiday of Purim. But what's very interesting, if you think about it, it occurred right when we were about to come back where? To the land of Israel. As soon as we're to come back to the land of Israel and bring God's name into the world again, all of a sudden there's Amalek. He's trying to stop us. Now, it's interesting. There was a third time in history when we were about to come back to the land of Israel also. You know what that was? In 1919, the British, Lord Balfour of Great Britain, they passed a bill in the British Parliament called the Balfour Declaration, which conferred that the state called Palestine, it conferred that the state called Palestine,
Maybe you got too high?
Maybe I got too high. Okay, yeah, it's too high. No, it's not. Maybe it's over here. There's another bulb. Who's good at this? Where's Jacob? Jacob. You have this? There's another bulb over here.
Maybe it'll come back on when it cools down?
Or maybe. I'm not. It shouldn't go off.
It goes off if it's hot.
There's two bulbs in there. Check out each one. There's two bulbs that should work. Excuse me. It's okay. Just keep working. I'll talk to you in a while. But what happened was, in 1919, there was a bill called the Balfour Declaration, which said that Palestine is the Jewish national homeland, and it gave the Jews the right to return. So what happened from 1919, Jews from all over Europe began returning to Israel. Now it's very interesting, 10 years after the Balfour Declaration, and Jews are coming back to Israel, a party arises in Germany called the Nazi Party. And the Nazi Party has one aim, as we know. I mean, certainly anti-Semitism was a big part of it. And here they are with a mission once again to destroy the Jewish people. So very fascinating. We see that Esau tried to stop Jacob 3 times to come to the land of Israel, and his grandchildren, Amalek, tried to stop the Jew 3 times as well. Once as we're going from Egypt to Israel, once we're coming back from Persia at the end of the Megillah, with the time of the Megillah back to Israel, and the 3rd time and after the Balfour Declaration in the 20th century. So now here it goes. It works like this a little bit. Who is this nation Amalek? What are they all about? It says that the nation Amalek is a nation that really, in many ways, is at war with God. It's a nation that is the opposite of what the Jewish nation is. If the job of the Jew is to bring God into the world, the job of Amalek is to keep God away. That's what they want to do. The deeper sources say that Amalek represents what they believed. They believed that everything is coincidental. There's no such thing as God. There's coincidence in the world. That's one way Amalek manifested itself. No God, everything is coincidence. We hear this idea, for example, when people talk about the world just existing, or that we're created from the monkey. That's the idea of Amalek. The idea that there's no direction, there's no creator, there's no designer. Everything is just an accident. We're really nothing more than a monkey. In fact, the word Amalek, if anyone knows Hebrew a little bit, the word Amalek means Amel Kuf, the activity of a monkey. They reduced themselves in a way that they said, we're just monkeys. We're just monkeys. Now it follows, by the way, that this nation had no morality. They were immersed in sexual immorality. Why? Because if you act like a monkey, and you think the essence of who you are is that you're an animal, why do you have to have any loyalty? What do you need loyalty for? We're just animals. Do what you want. Sexual morality is a statement that we're something more than an animal, and therefore loyalty is a part of who we are. They said you don't need that. And thirdly, they said, look, there's no such thing as God. There's nothing holy in this world. Nothing is holy. They were there to attack everything that we believe in. And it's a fight to the death, our rabbis say. They want to destroy us. Because the essence of the Jew is that our job is to bring God down. This nation is immersed in the ideology of thought that says you have to destroy any nation that's a connection with God. So whenever we were about to come into the land of Israel, what happens? There they are trying to stop us. Fascinating. We come out of Egypt, we're on our way to the land, there they are. We want to go back after 70-year exile during the time of the Purim story. All of a sudden Haman emerges. And he tries to stop us. 1919, we get permission to come back to the land of Israel, Balfour Declaration. All of a sudden emerges a party in Germany called the Nazis. They try to stop us. Okay, my friends. Maisa avos simul labanim. What the fathers did, the children will repeat. The fight between Jacob and Esau. Esau tries to stop Jacob 3 times. Amalek has seemed to have tried to stop us 3 times to come to the land of Israel. Now the question I have for you like this. How do we know that Germany is Amalek? How do we know? Certainly, emotionally you'll tell me that, they are, right? A nation committed to destroying 6 million? A nation that makes its national war aim the destruction of the Jewish people? Right? A nation that in 1944, Hitler ordered that the trains which were needed to send supplies to the soldiers on the Russian front be used to take Hungarian Jewry to Auschwitz. Eichmann says very clearly at the Eichmann trial, it was reported that he had made a statement that if I succeed in killing 5 million Jews, the war will have been worth it. But that's all emotional, I'm saying, right? Let me show you a prophecy. Is the projector working? How are we doing? It's cooled down. Okay. So I'm going to read to you the prophecy. You're going to have to take my word for you that I'm reading it, to trust me. It says as follows. You can look it up in the Gemara Megillah. The Gemara Megillah 6b. If you want to look it up, we got Gemaras upstairs. Take a look. If the projector works again, I'll show you on the screen. It says as follows. Gemara Megillah 6b says, Rav Isaac said, what is meant by the verse in Psalms that says, grant not the desires of this wicked man, do not take the bit out of his mouth. What's a bit? A bit is something you put in a horse to control the horse. It's called a bit. So it says that Jacob our father said, and TorahAnyTime says it to him, he says a quote, grant not the desires of this wicked man, don't take the bit out of his mouth. The Gemara continues and says, the Talmud says, Jacob said before Kadosh Baruch Hu, Jacob said before God, Sovereign of the universe, do not let Esav, this wicked man, do not allow him the desires of his heart. Do not take the bit out of his mouth. That's what Jacob said. Apparently Jacob made a prayer, Yaakov made a prayer to God, and he said, God, you know my brother Esav? Do not draw the bit out of his mouth. If you take that bit, that thing that controls the horse, if you allow Esav to do what he wants to do, he's going to go wild, like a horse will go wild without the bit. But listen to this. The Gemara continues. I just want to keep something in mind. The Gemara was written in approximately the year 400. Okay? Going back about over 1700 years. The Gemara continues. This refers to Germania of Edom. Germania of Edom. For should they go forth, they would destroy the whole world. Jacob says to Kadosh Baruch Hu, Jacob, our father, going back approximately 3,700 years ago, he makes a plea to the Almighty. Do not take the bit out of my brother Esav's mouth. And the Talmud said, what does he mean? He's talking about a nation called Germania. Germania of Edom. Edom is one of the Germania of Edom. For should they go forth, if you allow the bit to come out of their mouth, this nation will destroy the world. Germania sounds very much like what nation? Rav Yaakov Edom, 1695, 1776. Rashi also says, it is most likely that Germania is referring to our Germania, or Ashkenaz. In fact, one opinion says the correct reading of this Gemara is not Germania, it in fact is Germania. What nation in history has started 2 world wars? Germany. This refers to Germania of Edom, for should they go forth, they would destroy the entire world. Has there been any other nation besides Germany which has attempted to destroy the world not once but twice? Fascinating. The Gemara continues. Rav Chama ben Chanina said, there are 300 crowned heads in Germany, in Germania of Edom, and 365 chieftains in Rome. Every day one goes forth and meets the other, and one of them is killed. And they all have trouble in appointing a king again. Interesting. What's that about? There are 300 crowned heads in Germany, at Germania of Edom, and 365 chieftains in Rome. Let me just give you a little hint here. I can't do it on the projector. We're going to read to you. I'm reading to you now from the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by W.L. Scherer. He says as follows. By the end of the Middle Ages, which had seen Britain and France emerge as a unified nation, Germany remained a crazy patchwork of some 300 individual states. That's interesting. If you look in the Hebrew Encyclopedia, it says, the political disintegration of Germany had far-reaching effects. 300 princedoms and free cities guarded their economic autonomy. What did the Talmud say 1,700 years ago? That the one way you can find what this nation is look for a nation that has 300 princes. It's a very strange thing to have 300 princes. But I'll tell you something even stranger. When the Talmud was writing 1,700 years ago, Germania didn't exist. It didn't exist. There was no such nation. It was just a scattered group of tribes. That's all it was. It's only the Hebrew Encyclopedia and the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich that tell us that by the end of the Middle Ages, Germany remained a crazy patchwork of some 300 individual states. How did the Talmud know that? It didn't exist yet. And not only that, it says that one king of Germany goes forth and fights with one of the kings of Rome. And apparently that keeps them busy, and that's why they don't destroy the world. Question, if anyone study history, what characterized the Middle Ages? What was the Middle Age a fight between? It was a fight between the Habsburgs, which was Prussia and Germany, right? And the Holy Roman Empire, which was Rome. That was the 30 Years' War, that was the 100 Years' War. That was the fight between Germany and Rome. Apparently the Talmud is saying the fight between Germany and Rome is a fight that stops Germany from destroying the rest of the world. Which implies what? That if they're not fighting and they're unified, danger. Question. In World War II, what was the first country that Hitler made a treaty with? Italy. Italy. What was the only treaty that Hitler never broke during World War II? With Italy. With Mussolini in Italy. Somehow Hitler knew that the success of Germany depends on uniting himself with Italy. He broke a treaty with Russia, with Stalin. He broke a treaty with Poland. He broke a treaty with Czechoslovakia. He never broke the treaty with Italy. He understood that you need Italy. Unite with Italy, we can destroy the world. And very interestingly, what does it say? What did we do? What did the Allies do to Germany after the war? What did we do to Italy to Germany after the war? We divided it into two. West Germany, East Germany. Unprecedented. That has never happened in history, that you've taken a country and divided it in half, like with a wall going down the middle, called the Berlin Wall. What does the Gemara say? The Gemara says, come down, but that's not so good. The Gemara says, this refers to Germany of Edom. For should they go forth, they will destroy the whole world. Meaning you allow this country to unite, they will destroy the whole world. Somehow the Allies knew that the way you deal with Germany is you divide them. I don't think the Allies, I don't think Churchill and Roosevelt saw this Gemara. But I do think they understood something inside themselves that said you have to divide Germany in half.
Well, they learned it from World War I when they didn't separate.
Okay.
And they started on the second.
Good point. But the Talmud is writing this 1,750 years ago, before Germany even existed. It's Ruach HaKodesh. It's prophecy. Talking about a nation, Germani of Edom. Now, who is this? We're talking about the children of Esav. We're talking about the children of Esav. Now, let's define what they look like a little bit. So, there's a Gemara in Negoyim that talks about when a person speaks Lashon Hara, forbidden speech, to get a spiritual blemish on themselves. And that spiritual blemish has certain signs. One of the signs is that the skin turns white. So, one of the explanations on the Mishnah says the whiteness is like the whiteness of the hair of the people of Germania. What did Hitler pride himself in? What did the Germans pride themselves in? Blue eyes and blonde hair. Interesting. So we get a feature of what this nation looked like. Blonde hair. Now, it's very fascinating. So what have we learned about this nation so far? Number one, we understand there's a place called Germania that it wants to destroy the world. We know they have 300 princes, which history bears out for us. We know it's a place that has blonde hair. Let's see if we could identify another feature about this nation to discover if this is really Esav's descendant Amalek. You know, Esav is Esav. We know we have different animals that are not kosher. All of our exiles, we've been in 4 exiles. All the exiles are defined by one of those non-kosher species. The exile of Edom, which is the exile of Esav and his children, which we're in right now, is defined by our rabbis as the exile of the pig. Now, why the pig? The chazir. What's unique about the pig that's special about the pig, and it's not like any other non-kosher animal? What does an animal need to be kosher? It has to have split hooves and many stomachs, and chewed cud. All non-kosher animals except the pig have closed hooves, but they have closed hooves, right? But they can chew their cud. The pig is the only non-kosher animal, apparently. Does it work? Oh. I'm very impressed if it does. Oh, beautiful, beautiful. So turn it off for a second. I'm going to need it in a minute. I'm going to do it for the second part. The pig is the only non-kosher animal that has a split hoof like this, but doesn't chew its cud. Doesn't have more than one stomach. The pig represents the concept of what? Of hypocrisy. Hypocrisy. Look at me on the outside, I'm kosher, but on the inside I'm totally treif. On the inside I'm corrupt. Question. If you were to define the German nation, would that not be a perfect description? Dankeschön, bitteschön. Perfectly dressed, perfectly polished. Göring had 5 PhDs. As they're gassing Jews in Auschwitz, they're playing Beethoven and Bach and Mozart and Wagner. We're so cultured, we're so refined. But on the inside, they're animals. They're animals. Worse than animals, what's that? Interesting. That's the Chazir. You know, there's a famous story that occurred with Rav Hutner. Rav Hutner was the Rosh Yeshiva of Chaim Berlin. A man came to Rav Hutner after the war. He said to Rav Hutner, do you remember me? He said, no. Clear that this man was gone to the war, the concentration camps. He looked, he said to Rav Hutner, he said, I thought about you every day I was in Auschwitz. He said, what do you mean? He said, remember before the war, we used to argue in the yeshiva, and I used to say that the Germans, you could learn a lot of good things from the Germans. You could learn a lot from their politeness. And you used to say back to me, no, it's only on the outside, it's fake. And I disagreed with you. I said, no, we can learn. And remember the example that I gave you? The example I gave you, you know, if you know a little German, he said if you ask a German a question, they'll always respond with the word nicht wahr. Nicht wahr in Hebrew German means, isn't it so? Isn't it true? For example, how do you get to the library? Take a right, take a left, and then go straight. Nicht wahr? Isn't it so? As if to imply, I'm not telling anything you don't know. So I used to say to you, that's an example of politeness. You don't want to rule your knowledge over somebody. You want to show you also know what I know. Nicht wahr? Isn't it so? I was in Auschwitz, in one of the concentration camps, I remember. A Nazi was beating a Jew. He came over to me, he gave me the club. He said, you beat him. I said, I can't. He said, if you don't beat him, I will kill you. So I took the club, and as lightly as I could, I started hitting the Jew. He grabs the club from me, and he starts hitting the Jew with all of his might. And he said, this is the way you hit a Jew, nicht wahr? This is how you hit a Jew, isn't it so? When he said that, I realized you were right. Polite on the outside, but corrupt on the inside. Apparently that's one of the qualities of Amalek. They're so polite on the outside, and so corrupt on the inside. In the year 1898, the German Kaiser Wilhelm came to Jerusalem. This is recorded in Guardian of Jerusalem, the life of Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. The entire city went out to greet him. Some went out of curiosity, and others in order to recite the blessing, who has given us his glory to flesh and blood. You're supposed to, when you see a king, even a non-Jewish king, you make a blessing that God has given such power to a human being. Rabbi Chaim Sonnenfeld, however, did not go out to greet the Kaiser. He gave the opportunity to, why? Because he had heard from his Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin, that it had been said in the name of the Vilna Gaon that the German nation is from the seed of Amalek. They exhibit the classic symptoms of Amalek, externally polite and friendly, but harboring a deep and bitter hatred of the Jewish people. It's in 1898. 1898. 32 years before anyone heard of the man named Adolf Hitler. But we've always had a tradition that Germany is Amalek. Very fascinating. Very fascinating over here. Okay, let's go a little further. Let me just take you for one more idea. What did I tell you at the beginning in the first battle that Amalek has with the Jewish people in the desert? I read from you the medrash that says the Jews that they killed, they took their bris milah and they started mutilating it, throwing it up into the air. They hated bris milah. Why does Amalek hate bris milah so much? What do they have against bris milah? Well, I'll tell you what they have against bris milah. What does bris milah represent? Bris milah is a covenant between us and God. What does that covenant mean? It means that we're going to make a mark on the area of our life which is filled with passion. And we're to say to God, we're not going to be ruled by the animal in who we are. We're going to rule over the animal in who we are. That's what bris milah symbolizes. But if the vision of Amalek is there's no God, I'm just an animal anyway, you can understand why they hate bris milah. They hate it with a passion. They took the Jews' bris milah and they started mutilating it. Why? Because bris milah says, I'm not an animal. I'm a soul. And I have to rule over the animal in myself. Now listen to this. Adolf Hitler, let me read you his words. Yamach Shemo. In an interview with Hermann Rausching in 1940, The Voice of Destruction. I'm going to quote from you the words of Adolf Hitler. They regard me as an uneducated barbarian, he exclaimed jubilantly. Yes, we are barbarians. We want to be barbarians. It's an honorable title. Sure, to be a barbarian, you can do whatever you want. don't have to be ruled by conscience or soul. Be an animal. I have no conscience. My conscience is Adolf Hitler. The 10 Commandments have lost their validity. Conscience is a Jewish invention. It is a blemish like circumcision. Interesting. That's what he says at the end. It is true we are barbarians. It's an honorable title. I free humanity from the shackles of the soul, from the degrading suffering caused by the false vision called conscience and morality. The Jews have inflicted 2 wounds on mankind: circumcision on its body and conscience on its soul. What does Hitler have against circumcision? Well, if he is descendant of Amalek, we understand what he has against circumcision. Because circumcision says you can't be an animal. You have to rule the animal in you. Our covenant with God is on the point of the body, which says we're going to control the animal. We're going to be ruled by something deeper than the animal who we are. But the essence of Amalek is they want to be animals. That their name signifies Amal Kuf, the work of the Kuf, of the monkey. And that's their whole vision. There's no God. Life is coincidence. God doesn't exist. We descended from the monkey. It's all evolution. Right? There's no holiness in the world. That's Amalek. Okay? Enough evidence that Germany is Amalek, everybody? Okay. Let me take you to the screen. Yeah, question?
Yeah, you're saying the nation of Amalek doesn't believe in God.
Right.
How come Hitler specifies Jesus as God?
Not really. They call themselves God gelobt, which is that they believe in some great force, but not God. In fact, Eichmann at his trial, if you read it says the trial of Eichmann in Jerusalem. So even before Eichmann was hung, Eichmann was the one responsible basically for the mass slaughter in Europe. And he was tried by the Israelis in 1960. And 1961, thank you. In 1961, right before he was to die, he asked him, he said, do you want a priest or a minister? And his words back, he said, I have no time for this. He said, I don't believe in the world to come. He says, don't waste my time with that. That signified there was no real belief in God. Yeah?
I read somewhere that God wanted him to eradicate all the Jews, and he said that he believes he did it for God.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's certain mimicry, like Esau wanted to mimic Yaakov also, like we are really the true Jews, that type of concept. But the essence of Amalek, of what he represented, is they want to destroy the nation that wants to bring connection to God. That's us. Okay, we go to the screen.
How do you reconcile the geographical discrepancy? Because Germania is not, in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And those people in the
Right.
Middle East didn't have
The children, so
how does Esau
how did you get, I don't know.
switch?
I don't know. At some point,
You have a look in Ari Kaplan's Chumash.
yeah,
Germania is next door to Poras,
Right.
Persia.
right.
Apparently, it must have been either because of a few things, how they emigrated to Europe. Sanherib,
Right.
so the Assyrian assault on the Middle East mixed around the Umas. Some people kept their names, some people didn't keep their names. Germany kept their name, and they just moved from the Middle East to
Right.
Europe. That's all.
Very possible. Okay, everybody, let's now take a look over here. I want to take you to the Megillat Esther for a moment. Okay, how are we going to do this? Let's start like this. Okay. Over here, we have a quote from the Megillat Esther. Sorry, it's. Can we pull back a drop in there?
I think you have to go forward.
Go forward. Go forward.
Just leave right here.
What's that?
Right here. Yeah, right here. Sharpness?
No, go forward. If we go forward, we'll make it smaller. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, excuse me. Okay. Somebody's good at PowerPoint. They're going to make me a PowerPoint presentation. It says as follows. In the Megillat Esther. Okay, I don't know how I'm going to do this here. Let's see if we go smaller. Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, now we're getting it. Okay.
And then just use the orange knob to focus.
Thank you. Okay. Good? Everybody can say okay? This is a copy of the Megillat Esther. We're going to read on Purim. We put the English in the middle, and the layout on the side is the way it really looks. What we see over here in the Megillat Esther, we know the storyline. The storyline is, in a nutshell, right, that a man named Haman emerges with the mission to destroy the Jewish people. The Jewish people, we do tshuva. It turns out that Esther ends up in the palace, married to Achashverosh. There's a great turnaround of events. And Achashverosh, in his great love for Esther, allows us to destroy our enemies instead of being destroyed. And, right, that's the holiday that we have. The holiday that should have been our destruction turns out to be the destruction of our enemies. At the end of the Megillat Esther, which we're going to read Thursday night, we're going to see that Haman and his 10 sons are hung. He had 10 sons, and they're hung. The way that the Megillah writes it, it's a very interesting way. It writes it in a column like this. It's one of the only places in the entire Torah and the entire writings and prophets that's written like this, that it's written in a column. Why is that? Because graphically it's supposed to represent a gallows. It looks like a pillar, like a gallows, right? That they're going to fall and never be able to come back up again. It's a gallows. And these are the 10 names of the sons of Haman. Now it's interesting. Right across in the Megillah are lines of viets. Do you see the viets? 10 viets like this. Right? Each going corresponding. Now it's true grammatically. If you name one name, then you want to say another name, you do say et. Viet. But it's interesting, the way Mordechai and Esther wrote the Megillah is they wrote it in a way that there will be one column of the 10 sons of Haman being hung, and there will be another column of viets. As if it looks like its own gallows. Right? Just the image you get is like, it's another gallows of, some say the word viet means it's to replicate. As if to say there are 10 unknown people who are going to be hung. That's the image. Do you see that graphic a little bit? How it looks a little bit like there are two gallows. 10 names of Haman, and then the 10 viets also in a gallows. As if to apply, who's it talking about? Who's it talking about? Now, let's look at the Megillah for a moment. Right after the 10 sons are hung, if you see where I've underlined there, I'm going to read it to you. It says like this. I'll read it to you in Hebrew. Is it in focus, everybody? Are we doing okay? It says, Esther says, Im al ha-melech tov, if it pleases the king, yinatin gam machar liYehudim asher b'Shushan, please allow for the Jews tomorrow, please allow tomorrow for the Jews who are in Shushan, lasod kedat hayom, to do like that which was done today, v'et aseret b'nei Haman yittu al ha'etz, and please allow that the 10 sons of Haman be hung on the tree. Let me read it again. Ala melech tov, if it pleases the king, yinaten gamachar, please allow tomorrow the Yehudim, for the Jews asher b'Shushan, lasod kedat hayom, to do like was done today, v'et aseret b'nei Haman yittu al ha'etz, please allow that the 10 sons of Haman be hung on the tree. Now, one observation. In the entire Megillat Esther, who is absent? Who is never mentioned once in the entire Megillat Esther? Hashem. Because the whole purpose is to reveal Hashem, to see Hashem behind history, to see Hashem where Hashem hides himself. That's the whole purpose of the Megillah. Hashem's name will never be found in the entire Megillah. However, we have a principle. The principle says like this. It says, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Levi said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, every time the Megillah uses the phrase King Achashverosh, it refers to King Achashverosh himself. But every usage of the word king alone has a double meaning, referring both to God and to Achashverosh. Meaning when we say Hamelech without the Achashverosh, that means the king, not King Achashverosh. What does Esther say? Esther says, Im ala melech tov, if it pleases who? The king. Who's Esther speaking to? Please give tomorrow, allow it to be tomorrow, for the Jews to do like that was done today. That the 10 sons of Haman should be hung on the tree. There's your question. Were the 10 sons of Haman just hung? Why is she asking for 10 dead men to be hung? They're dead. They're so dead that the way Mordechai and Esther wrote the Megillah was they wrote it in a way that you could actually see them dead. You see the column, right? Why is she asking for 10 dead men to be hung on the tree? They're dead. What's she doing? What's she saying? And not only that, but let's look at her words a little carefully. She said, if it pleases Hashem, pleases you Hashem, tov yinetan gam machar. Please allow for something to happen machar. What does machar mean? Tomorrow. She's saying, please allow it to happen tomorrow, like happened to happen today, that the 10 sons of Haman shall be hung on the tree. She's asking for something in the future. She's asking something in the future, that Haman's 10 sons should be hung in the future. But wait a minute, they're already dead. Unless she's asking for something that's going to happen many years later in the future. What might she be referring to? What might she be referring to? Now I'll tell you something. Yeah.
I have a question. They were already dead.
Yes. That's what it means. That's why they see them dead. That's the column. That's all the 10 sons of Ham, like in the gallows. Lined up on the gallows. That's the 10 sons of Ham. Boishtonda, Dalphon, Asfasa, Parasa, Adaya, Idasa, Horamasa, Arisi, Aridi, Viosasa. Right? There they are, dead. And she's saying, please allow tomorrow that they be hung. 10 sons of Haman be hung. So is she asking for these 10 sons of Haman to be hung? Or is she asking for some future sons of Haman to be hung? Now, I'll tell you something. This line in the Megillah has bothered the Jewish people, without exaggeration, for the last 2,400 years. The Rokeach writes 900 years ago. He says, that's the only one I saw, but he says, I don't know what Esther is talking about, but obviously she's talking about some future Amalekim, some future sons of Haman who are going to require hanging. That's what the Rokeach writes 900 years ago. We have never found the answer to what Esther has been asking until very recently. In 1946, after World War II, there convened a trial in Germany in a place called Nuremberg. It was called the Nuremberg Trials. At the Nuremberg Trials, Nazi war criminals were put on trial and trialed for crimes against humanity. This was something that the world had never done before. To take the leaders of a country and to accuse them of crimes. Not just war crimes, but crimes against humanity. Sitting in the backs over here are the Germans. In the back are the Allied guards. In front, different interpreters. And it was a trial in which all of the evidence was presented against them for what they did. Closer look. Take a look where they're all dressed. So immaculate, so perfect. Ties, so refined, so German, elegant. People who could murder millions of Jews and children. Now, it's interesting. The world did not want to hang these people. The world didn't want to hang them. In fact, the Germans didn't. The Germans felt, even if you're going to kill them, don't hang them. Because hanging is a death you give to a common criminal. If you're going to kill them, shoot them by firing squad. Firing squad is a soldier's death. Kill them honorably. Firing squad. And the world, the Germans especially, were pushing for death by firing squad. And there was a cry out in the world to say no, that they're common criminals, and they have to be hung. But the world didn't want to do it. Now, it's interesting that the verdict was decreed in June of 1946 of that year. The verdict to kill 11 of the major criminals, the major Nazis. However, what happened was something very interesting. The night before the executions, Goering, who was the vice chancellor of Germany, had cyanide smuggled into his cell, and he committed suicide. Very interesting. He committed suicide. And there was a whole controversy how he got that cyanide, how he got it in there. But let me just say something which is very fascinating, by the way. How many ended up being hung? 10. How many children did Haman have? How many children did Haman really have?
12 daughters.
He had 11. He had a daughter, didn't he? How did that daughter die? We know the story. What happened was, we know that Mordechai was riding on the horse, and Haman was leading Mordechai, and his daughter looked up from the window and assumed that it was Mordechai leading Haman, so she took the waste, the toilet waste from the house, she dumped it out the window, intending to hit Mordechai. It hits her father. Her father looks up, and the Medrash on the verse in the Megillah says that she was so distraught what she did, she jumped out of the window and committed suicide.
From the roof.
Off the roof, she committed suicide. He had one daughter commit suicide. 11 were about to be hung. One commits suicide. Haman has 11 children. One commits suicide. Okay, I mean, look, Esther asked for 10. There have to be 10. Someone had to oblige. You know, what can we do? Okay, Esther said 10, so one of them has to get out of the picture. I got 10 to be. I didn't say 11. I said 10. So one of them had to oblige to commit suicide. But I'll tell you something very fascinating also. I know what you're going to say. I'm going to say it also. If you look into into certain studies that have come out after the war, they discovered that Hermann Goering was a transvestite. He used to wear women's clothing under his uniform. So whatever that means, just think about it. Hermann Goering, the one who committed suicide, was actually evidence is coming after the war that he used to wear women's clothing under his underneath his clothing. So now it's interesting, by the way. I'll just show you some pictures here. Yeah. Good. For sure. What? Right, of Amalek, of Haman. These are pictures.
And really was a mess. And you saw how the pictures were leading to the downfall of his father. So he ran away
Interesting. Sure.
That's why TorahAnyTime saved.
Okay, 1 second. Just these are pictures over here of Hermann Goering dead. That's what he looked like in his lifetime. Mak Shemo. There he is, and there he is dead. Okay? But that got everybody upset that they took their life. So what happened after this? What happened was we're supposed to hang them the next morning, and they decided that they didn't want anybody else to escape. So apparently they shackled everybody and they made sure this wouldn't happen again. Let me show you a calendar, everybody. Here's a calendar over here. Jewish calendar. The year that they were hung was the Jewish year Tafshin Zayin, 5707, which is October 1946. Oh no. Is that it? Blown out? Don't blow out. It's too hot. Okay. What's that?
It's getting old.
The fan's not working?
If you leave it on, the fan's going to work right now.
No, it's not working. Okay. You have to do it with me then. Okay, I'm going to have to do it with everybody. I apologize. More powerful.
The other bulb? You have 2 bulbs?
Yeah. It's take too long. Okay, let me explain to everybody then.
Maybe the other bulb will not work because it's cooled down.
Change the walls, it's too hot.
Oh, darn. Right at the climax over here. I apologize. That the year that they were hung, everybody, was the year 5707. Okay? This is October 1946. They were supposed to have been hung when? They were supposed to have been hung in June. But there was a delay. No one wanted to hang them. They ended up being hung when? On the 16th of October, which was 21st of Tishrei, in 1946. What happens in the Jewish year in Tishrei, what happens? It becomes what? It becomes the new year. Right? It becomes the new year. That's to say that 5706 would be before Tishrei. 5707 would be after Tishrei. They ended up being hung on 5707, which was the 21st of Tishrei. Okay. Now it's interesting. The day that they were hung was Hoshana Rabbah, which the Zohar says that Hoshana Rabbah is the day when sentences are issued and judgment is executed for the nations of the world. Okay. Now that's very interesting, but just keep this in mind. Had they been hung in June, what year would that have been? 5706. They were hung when and what year? 5707. Okay, now, you have to do this with me. Without the projector, I apologize. We'll try. Take a look over here. Can everybody see this? Look carefully with me. I wish I had this thing working. You have to trust me on this. Remember I pointed out to you the columns of the names? What I didn't point out to you was that there are 4 letters that are written in a very funny way. In the first name, there's a little tough. In this name, there's a little shin. And in the last name, there's a little zayin, written very small. Now, you'll say, okay, Rabbi Kraft, that's not such a big deal. But let me tell you how much a big deal that is. Listen carefully, everybody. In the Torah, we have approximately 305,000 letters. In the prophets, we have another perhaps 150,000 letters. In the writings, we might have another 100,000 letters. That means total there are at least 600,000 letters in Jewish scripture. Of those 600,000 letters, only 23 are written either small or large. 23 out of 600,000. 3 of them happen to be within 10 words of each other. And you know what? Tav Shin Zayin is what? That happens to be the date which we talked about as 5707, Tav Shin Zayin, which is the English year 1946. But Jewish prophecy has to be exact. How many times in Judaism has 707 occurred in human history? Right now we're in the year 5,700 and... What year are we in? 68. How many times has 707 occurred in the last 5,768 occurred? Well, let's see. There was 707. There was 1,707. There was 2,707. There was 3,707. You're with me, everybody? There's 4,707. And there was 5,707. We need the date 5,707. So 707 is not enough. That's not specific enough. But if you look at the last name, there's a vav, which is enlarged. One of those 23 letters in the 600,000 or so letters in all of Scripture that's enlarged is that vav. Right there. It's a super big vav. Vav, what's the numerical value of vav? 6. What might it be referring to?
6,000.
The 6th millennium. That's to say, year 0 to 1,000 is the first millennium, 1,000 to 2,000 the second millennium, 2,000 to 3,000 the third millennium, 3,000 to 4,000 the fourth millennium, right? 4,000 to 5,000 the fifth millennium, 5,707 is the sixth millennium. Esther encoded a date. 6th millennium, 5,000. 500. The 6th millennium, 707.
In the first month.
She encoded it in these small letters. For the last 2,400 years, we had no idea why we had a large vav there and why we had a small tuf, a small shin, and a small zayin. We had no clue until 1946. When we realized what Esther had done is she had encoded the year of the Nuremberg trial. But let me ask you a question. Had they been hung when in June? What year would that have been? That would have been 706. And there was a difficulty in hanging them. The world didn't want to hang them. And there was arguing back and forth, until finally they were hung when? In Tishrei, 707. What date? 21st of the month of Tishrei, Hoshana Rabbah, when judgment is executed on the world. And we see the date exactly, 5707. And therefore, when Esther is pleading with the king, she said, if it pleases the king, Hashem, Tov yintein gam machar, please allow for it to happen tomorrow, like it happened today, that the 10 sons of Haman will be hung on the tree. She was asking for something that would take place when? 2,400 years in the future. Is that prophecy?
She was on the Via.
Is that prophecy? Is that a weather report? Or is she giving the exact year and date when 10 children of Haman, 10 Amalekim, 10 Germans are going to need to be hung? And we get the exact date of when they are hung. But I'll tell you a question. Maybe you're not convinced yet. You're not convinced. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Let me read to you from Newsweek, 1946. Newsweek, 1946. The 13 steps. Frantic prison officials determined that no other victim should escape them Well, who are they talking about? They're talking about, because Goring committed suicide. They shackled the 10 surviving convicts in their cells. Then in 90 minutes, in the early hours of October 16th, they followed each other to the gallows. Former Foreign Minister Yochanan van Ribbentrop, pale and disheveled but unflinching, inheriting Goring's #1 spot, flanked by American MPs and a chaplain, he walked the 35 yards from the cell block to the brightly lighted gymnasium at 1:11 a.m. Blinded by the glare, he stood inside the door facing the 3 black wooden scaffolds, erected on a floor where American soldiers had played basketball only 4 days before. The manacles were removed, his hands were bound behind him. Then Ribbentrop walked steadily to the foot of the 13 steps. He gave his name firmly and announced and mounted the 6-foot platform where Major Sergeant John C. Woods, veteran executioner of 347 men and 15 years, awaited him. The American executioner was named John C. Woods. What did Esther say, by the way? She said, if it pleases the king, please allow that the sons of Haman be hanged on the eights. What does eights mean in Hebrew? It means wood, right? Wood. The executor's name happened to be John C. Woods. Okay, it's just a joke. I don't know. Think about it. I don't know what to do with that. It's just funny. I don't know what to do with it. Okay. So he said, he stood on the trap beneath the rope suspended from a heavy wooden beam overhead, while an army belt was pulled tightly around his ankles. God protect Germany. God have mercy on my soul. He cried in a ringing voice. May I say something? The American officer nodded. My last wish is that Germany realize its unity and that understanding be reached between East and West. He stared straight ahead, tightly set, the black hood dropped over his head. Then came the noose, and the trap banged open at 1:16, while a stiffening body hung behind the screen that hid the gallows. 3 knocks sounded. Field Marshal William Keitel, clothes neatly pressed and shoes shined. Oh, look at that Amalek. Entered. The guards executed him with precise, ruthless efficiency and brought in one after the other. Now listen to the last paragraph of Newsweek, 1946. Only Julius Streicher went without dignity. Now, who was Julius Streicher? Julius Streicher was the editor of Der Stürmer. Der Stürmer was the most anti-Semitic newspaper in Germany. I have pictures here of some of the things they printed about Jews, but I can't show you right now. He had to be pushed across the floor, wild and screaming, Heil Hitler. Mounting the steps, he cried out, and now I go to God. He's going to have a big surprise waiting him. He stared at the witnesses facing the gallows and shouted, Purim Fest, 1946! And Newsweek adds, Purim is a Jewish festival. In case we didn't understand what Esther was communicating to us, the biggest Nazi of them all had to tell us what was going on. That this was a reenactment of the hanging of the 10 sons of Haman. The prophecy which Esther had forecasted 2,400 years before. That's Jewish prophecy, my friends. That's Jewish prophecy.
How long did it go?
2,400. You know, I'll tell you something.
Gematria Amalek.
240, which means suffix.
Yeah, but if you take up the zeros,
Yeah.
it doesn't make a difference. 4.
You know, when you see something like this, I've seen this many times. Probably you've seen it many times, yeah? Each time I say it, I get the chills.
I just got the chills.
Because we're seeing prophecy. We're seeing prophecy. Seeing something which demonstrates that the authors of the Megillat Esther were in touch with the one who controls history, which is Hashem. You can only give a prophecy for something that will happen 2,400 years out if you're in contact with the one who can control what will happen 2,400 years out, and who knows what's going to happen 2,400 years out. When you see something like this, the reality of Hashem's existence becomes very apparent, extremely apparent. The reality when we saw in Germania, the fact that the Talmud talks about this nation Germania that didn't exist yet, tells you what it looks like, where it is, how many princes it has, what its spiritual qualities are, what they're going to do if you let them loose. Prophecy means that there's a world beyond the world that we see. There's a spiritual world. There's a world which has been guided by Hashem. The job of a Jew is to connect those worlds. Our job as Jews is to declare that the world that we see isn't the reality. The real world is the world that we can't see. The world that's been controlled and guided by God. That's what we live for, that's what we exist for, and that's our job as a nation. The nation of Amalek is the exact opposite of who we are. Their job is to say, no, God doesn't exist. The world is just a coincidence, it's just an accident. We're here for no purpose. We don't have a moral purpose, we don't have a spiritual purpose, we're just animals. The job of the Jew is to say the reverse. That the real world is what we don't see and God is everything. So I hope the message that we get from a presentation like this is to focus on that realization. That this is real. That Hashem exists. God gives us hints. He gives us prophecy. He's showing us that He's there. He's demonstrating it to us. And if He exists, we have to make Him exist. We have to make Him real in our lives. And that's the challenge. The challenge of a presentation like this is when it's over, you think about it a little bit. And you stop and you reflect on it. And I'm including myself with you. Say, yeah, we just witnessed something. We witnessed a demonstration of control of history. And if God is real and God exists, am I relating to Him the way I'm supposed to be? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I focusing on that reality? That's not always so easy to focus. But the point of a type of realization like this should bring us to an understanding that we have to keep it clear. We've got to remember it, that Hashem is there. We've got to focus. What does He want from me? He wants me to have a relationship with Him. He wants me to grow. He wants me to get to know Him. The way we get to know Him is through the mitzvot. He wants us to be exacting in the mitzvot because it's so good for us. And it's the way to hook up with Him. We have responsibilities as Jews. We have to live up to it. Because when we do live up to those responsibilities, we're testifying that, God, You exist. We're doing what You want me to do. You are there. And that is the purpose of the Jewish nation. To bring God's existence out into reality that everyone should see. And that's the spiritual battle that we have with Amalek throughout history. You know, this week we read, in the synagogue, we're going to read Parshas Zachor. There's a positive commandment to remember to wipe out the nation of Amalek. We're supposed to wipe them out physically. Fortunately today, we don't know who they are. They're scattered around the world. We can't just go up to somebody and say, oh, Amalek. It doesn't work that way. But the deeper sources tell us that what it means, in addition, is we have to wipe out the ideology of Amalek. That's an ideology that says that everything is accidental, that there's chance in the world, that God isn't in control, that God doesn't exist. That, remember what Amalek tried to do? They tried to say, oh, look, what God? What was the God? You just received the Torah, big deal, we'll attack you. You're just animals anyway. We came from monkeys. Who needs morality? Who needs any type of goodness in the world? Do what you want to do. Be an animal. We have to wipe out those feelings from ourselves and focus that everything is Hashem. Things have importance. Things have value. Life has meaning. It's not accidental. We are not animals. We have souls. That's how we wipe out Amalek. There's no coincidence in the world and in our lives. God is guiding it and directing it. And if we could succeed a little bit in removing those feelings from ourselves, we'll be able to fulfill the mitzvah of remembering to destroy Amalek, to get rid of it, to wipe it out, to wage that cosmic war, which is a war against bringing God into the world or destroying God. And that war is still going on today, believe me. And our job as Jews is to fight for God. We're His underground army, fighting to show that He exists. And Bezrat Hashem, we're going to see His full revelation. Mr. Hashem, very soon. Amen.